This video is brought to you by Dashlane. This is the artwork of Polish abstract artist Zdzisław Beskiński, and if you like it or you find it compelling, then I think you might enjoy The Medium from Polish studio Bloober Team. Now let me say this at the beginning, a huge part of this game's appeal is its visual design, the art and the architecture of the spirit world. In fact, that was the biggest driving force pushing me forward in this game because these environments were so stunning that I just wanted to keep playing to see more of them. And the game just kept exceeding expectations over and over again. Now I'm going to show you some of this in the review because it's a video review and some of you will want to see what I'm talking about, but I actually recommend that you don't look at the screen during this review and just listen to it as you would a podcast. And if what I have to say interests you, you should play it and get to see these spaces for yourself the first time. That is absolutely the best way to experience this game. I really recommend this and I want to make sure people enjoy it as much as I did. With that spoiler warning out the way, let's take a look at The Medium. The Medium is a game I walked into with zero expectations. I knew it was from Bloober, the team who had done the critically acclaimed Observer, and I'd seen some trailers, but I wasn't sure what this game was actually going to be. It just kind of looked like a survival horror. So that's not correct. This is not a survival horror, it's more of a narrative-driven horror game. There are no weapons here, there's no health bar or green herbs to feed it, there's no inventory management, there's no survival aspects, just horror. And by the way, it's not really that scary. I know people have different tolerances for this sort of stuff, but I feel like Resident Evil 2 Remake is a good baseline. This is a lot less scary than that. I think I counted maybe one jump scare, and there aren't any hideous spiders or zombies or whatever. There's no gore. It's really more of a paranormal thriller than a straight up horror, I think. Point is, this is less scary than you probably think it is, and if you had doubts about picking this up because of that stuff, I feel like those concerns might be unwarranted. Anyway, this game isn't what you'd call a walking simulator, but it's close to that. You spend most of your 8-hour playthrough simply walking through the environments, picking up clues that slowly pull back the curtain on the Neva Resort, a communist-era recreation getaway long abandoned after a mysterious massacre. But walking isn't all you'll do. This is a playable experience more than not. The central conceit of the game is that the protagonist, Marianne, is a spiritual medium who exists in two worlds at once. She typically uses that power to usher people from the purgatory of the spirit world into a better place, but here she uses that power to break through the various barriers and obstacles that the Neva Resort throws up in front of her. At various points in the game, the screen will split and you'll be controlling Marianne in both worlds at once. The real world and the spirit world both have the same architecture, but they have their own obstacles that permit Marianne from moving forward in both worlds. So for example, you might see a clear path forward in the real world, but it's blocked by something in the spirit world. If Marianne can somehow clear that barrier in the spirit world, then she can progress through both worlds. The same thing works the other way. Often you'll encounter closed doors in the real world that stop you from progressing in the spirit world, so you somehow need to get them open, etc, etc. Now I like this stuff because it reminds me of Soul Reaver, and we need more Soul Reaver. We need a remake of Soul Reaver. We need sequels to Soul Reaver. We need a Soul Reaver anime and a Disney Plus show directed by Guillermo del Toro, starring Charles Dance as Kane and Robert Pattinson as Raziel because, you know, vampires. Anyway, I'm getting off track. My point is my point is The Medium uses this split reality thing often and to great effect. Holding down the B button separates you from your body entirely, allowing you to explore the spirit world and negotiate its challenges in a way that further broadens the puzzle-solving possibilities. I would say that at least a third of your playtime will be spent moonlighting between the real world and the spirit world, and I always enjoyed the puzzles and exploration that was offered. None of it was groundbreaking or exceptional. I don't think anyone will walk away from this experience and celebrate these aspects as the best part, but I think they're engaging enough that they feel like welcome interruptions to the narrative rather than bothersome. There are brief stretches of the game which are essentially stealth, and these are typically really well done. There's a monster ever at your heels and it pursues you in both the spirit world and the real world, and if you're in the real world, you need to hold your breath as this creature looms over whatever box or shelving you're huddled behind. As I said, these sections were few and far between, but I found them pretty stressful, which is exactly what the developers wanted me to feel. The biggest weakness in the playable aspects of the game are, I guess, what you can call boss encounters. There's 2 or 3 of them throughout your playthrough, and they typically ask you to manipulate the environment to your advantage to vanquish one of these monsters. In every instance, it didn't quite work. I'm not showing these encounters here, but just imagine that you have to press a button to do a thing, and you might have pressed it at the wrong time, or the boss was in the wrong spot, but still some awkward cutscene would teleport the boss enemy to the desired location, and you'd magically won the day. It's a minor nitpick because the core of this game is not about these brief encounters, but these represent real emotional or narrative peaks, and a lot of wind in the sails is lost when these encounters bug out the way that they do. Overall, if you're someone that demands that your video game be highly playable, I don't think the medium is for you. Most of the experience rests in the story and the visual presentation. It's not the puzzle solving, clever as it is. It's not the stealth, since these sections are very brief, and it's definitely not in the buggy boss encounters. The medium is about the story and its characters and its world, and you should have that expectation heading into it.
I woke up with icy water in my veins. I wanted nothing but to get out of there.
I would not say that the medium is a well-written game, but I do think it's interesting and compelling where it counts. Its narrative, scenarios, characters, and tone are really uneven, but the good carries you past the bad, and overall, I really enjoyed it. The story is told in the first person by Mary Ann, who is sitting there at the table at the start of the game, and she's talking you through it. This creates a lot of space for her to say things that really don't need to be said, and make the medium feel a lot less thought-provoking than it really is. I have a strong bias against superfluous first-person narration, like if I'm walking around as Mary Ann and I pick up a butterfly and then she says,
"Another one of those butterflies."
That annoys me because I'm like, dude, I know it's a butterfly, just let me get on with it. This game has a lot of this. More importantly, I almost never like inner monologues. It's one of the reasons I didn't love Control as much as everybody else. I just found the protagonist giving me a blow-by-blow of their thoughts and emotions and suspicions just so distracting and prescriptive. Like, it didn't let me feel out that character and get in her head because I could always rely on her to tell me exactly what she was thinking. It's the same here in the medium, where Mary Ann's very regular inner monologue makes her the least intriguing part of an otherwise pretty intriguing story. And this is what I really liked. I like not being told the thing, and everyone kind of guessing and hinting and implying and intimating, but never saying the thing. The medium story is built on that approach, where characters will elude traumatic events that shape them without ever giving you a soliloquy about their emotional torment. The game leaves you so many breadcrumbs, from postcards to letters to telegrams to whatever, and they're all really important in unpacking the story without being onerous. You're not going to spend the entire game reading scraps of paper you find on the ground which flood you with superfluous information just for world building's sake. Almost everything you can read connects directly to the story, and it's worth your time. It's a really well-balanced approach to exposition. The supporting cast are a real highlight. Unlike the protagonist, you don't know what they're thinking, you don't know what they're up to, you're always guessing what their angle is, and it doesn't become clear until the end, and I think it's a satisfying coming together. The last thing I'll say about the story is that thematically, it's very dark, it's a very adult game, so don't think of this as Resident Evil, where it's like, the T-virus is loose again, we have to stop the zombies. That's a very schlocky, grindhouse cinema thing. This is more like True Detective if the paranormal stuff was real. This is like Twin Peaks without the quirk. There are confronting themes at the core of this game, about the things that can happen to people that leave them forever emotionally scarred. It's not gratuitous, it's not wallowing in suffering. As I said, the game leaves much unsaid, but it does touch on these darker themes, and it's rare that a game touches some of these subject areas. I really appreciate how adult the medium felt on the whole. Like, some of it's dumb, where one of the supporting characters is named Sadness, a name so bad that even Hideo Kojima would be like, come on dude, don't name your character Sadness, that's lame. But in addition to some of that dumb stuff, this does feel like an adult story that takes itself seriously and expects the audience to do the same. It's uneven, but I think it's good, and I think a lot of people will really like this. Alright, so let's talk about the best part of the game now, just how incredible some of this looks. The The medium is set in 1990s post-communist Poland, and you see a little bit of that at the start of the game when you begin in your apartment, but you see a lot less of this brutalism throughout the rest of the game, as the Neva Resort is basically just a big recreation center that's a fairly unremarkable setting. Despite this, Bloober have done really wonderful work with camera and perspective. Now, these are fixed perspectives using tank controls, so the classic survival horror style controls from days past, and they can be a little clunky and they can be annoying, but it's worth it because most of the time, Bloober is framing the events in such an interesting way. The static camera angles really let you drink in the setting and communicate just how alone Marianne is on this journey. It's the moving camera that's really interesting though, where so often the camera will track you as you move through space, and some of the shots are just fantastic. The real world is generally pretty uninteresting to look at, but the way you look at it is almost always good. The spirit world is a whole other deal. This art, these spaces, it's not rare to find unique art direction in games, but sometimes you stumble on something that feels really stand out. The medium's spirit world is so arresting that you wonder why you haven't seen more of this stuff. I mean, yeah, it kind of looks a little bit like Hell in Doom 2016 and a little bit like parts of Remnant from the Ashes, but mostly it actually reminds me of Shadow Man, the janky third-person action game from 1999, and I know that's a weird comparison to make given that those other examples are probably closer to it, but it's very much about the vibe of Shadow Man, alone in this barren hellscape, the world governed by supernatural forces more than demonic or monstrous. Shadow Man is not a pretty game, and I don't know why they're remaking it, by the way, but they are. But Shadow Man left an impression on me. The medium did the same, and much of that is owed to just how intricate and hauntingly beautiful these landscapes are. There are some technical costs associated with how Bloober have built this game. Because the game is often rendering two landscapes at once with the ability to move back and forth between them, the game does struggle from time to time with texture load times, where you'll often have to wait a few seconds for textures to fully populate. More importantly, I play this game on an Xbox Series X, and it's capped at 30 FPS. Now, Bloober have said that they did this because of the technical limitations, but also because they wanted to focus on a cinematic experience, and they think that 30 FPS works better for that. In fact, one of the developers said, "I've played it at 60 and I much prefer it at 30. Look, to be honest with you, I don't really care about the frame rate goal in this specific instance because it's a very slow-paced, narrative-driven exploration game, so 30 or 60, I don't really think it makes a difference. What I do care about is how consistently the desired frame rate is maintained, and generally speaking, yeah, it's solid. It did dip a few times here and there, but nothing that came anywhere close to disrupting my enjoyment. I also had one crash in my 8-hour playthrough, and no other bugs or issues other than the glitchy boss encounters. Overall, with regards to technical performance, I think this is a pretty safe purchase on Xbox Series X. I haven't tested it on PC or Series S. This has been a fairly mixed review, and that's intentional because I think the medium is a fairly mixed package. Its gameplay is simple and it isn't trying to be the star of the show, but it's effective, barring a few hiccups along the way. Its writing is uneven, with a protagonist that sucks a lot of the mystery out of the scenes, but when the world and the supporting cast are allowed to do the talking, you're going to find a compelling adult mystery that isn't afraid to touch on some subjects that aren't often touched upon. Visually, it's quite literally a game of two halves, with a simple and uninteresting real-world setting offset by an absolutely stunning and abstract spirit world, to the point where you kind of hope that they make a sequel to this game and the whole thing is just spent in the spirit world because it's just so much more interesting than the rest of the game. It's 8 hours and that's absolutely the limit of it. I mean, I got most of the achievements during my playthrough, picked up every collectible. It's a very linear experience, so your playtime really can't deviate much outside that 8-hour mark. I really enjoyed this, I really did. All the things that I listed as issues, they weren't deal breakers by any means, they were just things that I think could have been better, and taken as a whole, the medium is a really interesting, well-paced paranormal thriller that plenty of people will find dull, but I think plenty of people will really enjoy. The good news is that it's on Game Pass, so you can just try it out for $10 on either PC or Xbox Series consoles, and yeah, decide for yourself. I don't think you'll be wasting your time if you give it a go. I recommend this to you, and I congratulate Bloober on another great title. Now look, we all have a lot of subscriptions and logins and passwords these days, and one thing you might be tempted to do is use one password for all of them, because you can't possibly be expected to remember them all. That is the worst thing you could do from a data security perspective, because if any one of those websites are hacked and your password is leaked, then your entire digital life is just hanging out there waiting for someone to come along and take advantage of it. Now that's where Dashlane comes in. Dashlane is a password management tool that does a whole bunch of stuff. Firstly, it helps you generate really complex, really strong passwords that are unlikely to be hacked. Of course, you won't remember those passwords, but that's okay because Dashlane autofills your passwords so you don't need to remember them, and it will also autofill your payment information or your address information if you want it to. Well, you might say, what if I'm on my phone, but I have all this set up on my PC? Again, Dashlane has you covered because their tools work across multiple devices and platforms. There's even a VPN tool thrown in to make your browsing even more secure. Dashlane makes everything you do online better, faster, safer, and more efficient. And you can get it for free on your first device by heading to dashlane.com/skillup. And if you decide to update to premium, use my code in the description below for 50% off. Make your online life much easier with Dashlane. Thank you, Dashlane, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.